Ajahn, can you hear now? Oh, it's gone.
I can hear you, Giles.
Ah, now we can see you.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Greetings, Ajahn.
Okay, hello.
Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Nice to
Can you see me?
You too. Oh. Thanks for that great talk.
Thank you both, for your great talks. I listened to both of them.
Thank you as well. Yeah.
It's a wonderful way to start my morning with 3 very beautiful Dharma talks and with the esteemed Sangha that we have here this morning. I'll just try and summarize, if I can, the themes of this morning, having just suddenly lost my notes. But I think the beginning was around the opportunity or having the perception of the virus as a situation normal. This is, and using right view that, this is the nature of reality, the first noble truth, in that things are impermanent and they are suffering. And that we can use this as an opportunity to take refuge within ourselves by observing that phenomena that rises and falls within ourselves, and to take those opportunities to both cultivate a practice through mindfulness, observation, and as an opportunity to enrich the practice as well. Just my apologies for suddenly losing everything. There were so many notes to take during the thing, but just as a practice that right behavior in terms of the way that we interact with the other people in the world, in taking compassion to not share unwanted illnesses when it's not necessary to, and also to cultivate that not just mindfulness, but compassion for other beings as well. There are some questions that I get to. One of the things I was curious as a lay person in the world and observing myself and being in the middle of other people is actually the rise of tanha, the rise of the kilesas, in terms of people's self-preoccupation with their own safety, the safety of their families, their existence seems to certainly challenge the desire to practice and to be mindful and to be present and perhaps more peaceful. Do you have any views on that perspective?
Are you talking to me, Giles, or anyone else?
To all, Ajahn.
All of them. Okay, good.
Yeah. So from a lay perspective, basically, our kilesas are taking over, and the desire to have, to be, to get away from, seems to be surging.
Yeah, should I start? Or I can start if
you
like.
Perhaps, yes.
Yeah. I don't think we should. I don't think we should set the bar too high. I think we should always realize that for most people, the Dhamma is a work in progress, and a lot of it is about, large part of our life is still going to be about our ordinary lives, about our family members, about ourselves, about our jobs, about our economy, about our health, and all these things. And we just can't really try to approximate to the Dhamma, really. So we need to find that we need a sense of a balance, I suppose, looking after our ordinary life and also looking after Dhamma. So with so many things, it's a gradual movement towards the Dhamma. So you accept the tanha. It's not a big deal. They don't make you upset or anything like that. But you realize that, when you, because of this right view of the world being unstable, being inherently unreliable, illness always being around the corner, all these kind of things, because you realize that at the back of your mind, you start to move gradually away from that, while not negating the fact or not trying to, hide the fact that we still have craving for worldly things. So it's a work in progress. It's a gradual movement towards the Dhamma, I think. Yeah, and it's perfectly acceptable to have the, the more worldly concerns as well at the same time.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Giles, shall I say something to this, or would you like to, Bhante Pemaratna?
Yeah, please. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Pemaratna Sadhu. I was thinking that it's perfectly natural and normal for us to wish to be safe, and to wish that our families and others be safe as well. And if we didn't have that wish, there would be something wrong with us. And So with right view, going to right view with the wish to be safe, then we'd like to find actually the most effective means to be safe, not means that are going to fail us. And the problem with our wish to be safe is when we turn to things that are not really able to do that for us, as Ajahn Brahmali was highlighting in his talk. And as Venerable Dr. Pemaratna Bhante was also highlighting, that this is where the real problem lies. This is where the kilesas that Giles mentioned, they're deceptive by nature because they're rooted in ignorance, they're rooted in misunderstandings. And then we want to be safe and we try things that don't work, or they work for just a short time. They seem to, but that's the deception. It's because then sometimes within a fraction of a second or within moments, we grasp after this elusive thing that is supposed to make us safe somehow, like having a big stockpile of toilet paper, and yet it just doesn't do it. In fact, our fear can become even stronger from that behavior, because we've just fed that delusion in a way, and then we've fed the other kilesas, and so then the underlying fear and the underlying misunderstanding that that's really going to save us gets fed, and our delusion can become even stronger, and then the negative emotions can become even stronger. Whereas if we wish for safety and then we really look into what truly can give that safety, what truly can help ourselves and our loved ones and our families, and then we engage really wisely and rightly, then that's going to be feeding all of these qualities that will help our view become more clear and our misunderstandings become less and our wrong actions become less and our wise and helpful and effective actions to become so much more so. And then our wish for safety can move in a direction that truly is towards safety and opening up the way of being safe in ourselves and sharing safety then with our loved ones and with each other. So I don't feel it's wrong for us to have such wishes at all. It's just a matter of do we apply ourselves well to those normal and even wholesome wishes or not, or do we further our delusions and then drown ourselves in the kilesas, the afflictions, as we were saying. Meanwhile, grasping after something that can't help, then not only do we drown, but we can bring down others as well. Hopefully they won't go down with us. We love them. We don't want them to go down with us. But if we're grabbing on something that's sinking, then the chances of our being able to really help are not good. So for this part, the wise view and wise understanding and then wise and right effort seems ever so important. And that's the topic that's come up in all three talks.
To use the Eightfold Path. Venerable, did you have something to add?
I think, the both venerables, speak to the point. I will simply add, what I observed among many people is the fear, actually, fear of losing their loved ones, fear of losing their comfortable life or whatever. So maybe the fear can be rooted again in tanha, definitely. But there are also like basic basic fear that is related to basic survival. But problem is that actually people do not know. I mean, many ordinary people do not know how to handle that. So because fear can be like a signal, right? So it is interesting. Like I didn't find like fear. Fear is not even listed as a unwholesome unwholesome mental state in Buddhist discourses. Of course, fear is directly related to tanha, but fear itself is not counted as a negative emotion like anger, for example, because it's an expression of a deeper craving. So I think what we have to do, like use the fear as a signal, as something like pointing to us to pay attention to, and then use that fear to, I mean, then understand where we should pay our attention to. So then, of course, again, the problem comes, what is the safety, what is the real refuge? I think if people can really use the fear and then, really turn into a true refuge, a true safety that they can find, that will be wonderful. And this is a good opportunity for that.
Thank you, Ven.
Bhante, I'd like to say something about the fear part in our Bhikkhuni Patimokkha. Now, because of the Bhikkhuni Sangha and Theravada being absent for a while, then originally the bhikkhus and the bhikkhunis are supposed to both know each other's patimokkha's, but not everyone does these days.
Yes.
In the Bhikkhuni Patimokkha, then actually rather than 3 poisons being mentioned, just the moha, dosa, and lobha, or greed, hatred, and delusion, actually bhaya is mentioned. 4 are mentioned repeatedly in Bhikkhuni Patimokkha. So we find 4 poisons, and we can see really how fear, how delusion, how greed, how hatred, how they can spread like wildfire. They're also called the 3 fires, as well as the 3 poisons. And we can see for fear how it can be a poison to us and how it can spread like fire as well. So sometimes many times the Buddha talked about 3 poisons, but sometimes talked about 4 poisons, apparently, with fear, bhaya being one, as we see in Bhikkhuni Patimokkha. So I find this really valuable to contemplate. Because all of these things can be kind of natural reactions to want something, or to want to get away from something, or to be confused when something is confusing, or for fear to arise, as you mentioned. But then they can get out of hand and become like wildfire that burns us even to our mortal loss, or poisons us even to the point of being deadly, where we even kill ourselves and one another over it. So I just wanted to offer that from our Bhikkhuni Patimokkha, that is our Buddhist women's monastic discipline from the Pali texts.
Yeah. Thank you, Bhikkhuni, for bringing that perspective.
Overtake our minds and hearts.
Actually, the bhaya comes together with the greed, hatred, and delusion as 4 biases. These together with 3 poisons. Bhaya can influence our ability to discern something properly. So it appears, in the Buddhist text, but whenever we talk about the list of unwholesome mental states, I'm curious, why fear is not listed. Even in Abhidhamma, and even in Abhidhamma, even in suttas like like Vatu Pema Sutta, where you find a list of unwholesome mental states, even like conceit and jealousy and all kind of lists, but we don't find fear there. It's something to explore.
We understand all biases are unwholesome. They're based in delusion. So we can know that much. But Bhante, mentioning about fear, one thing that I found really useful at this time is something that you mentioned in your talk. And it's like the practicing the Buddha's teachings as preventative medicine, or as you said, like preparing before a sports event. And then the game day comes and then you're well prepared. I really appreciated that, because with regards to fear, our 3-month retreat was on anapanasati, or mindfulness of breathing. And a lot of people are afraid if they get COVID-19, because it's acute respiratory distress, that they're not going to be able to breathe. And that seems horrible and terrifying. And this is one of the things that I found with having the practice of mindfulness of breathing and practice in mindfulness meditation and in other meditation practices taught in the early Buddhist teachings. Then we know that the breath starts being kind of long and and even harsh. And then it becomes much more subtle and much more subtle, even until the point that the breath even disappears. And yet we know that our human body is not suffocating at that time. The human body is actually healing itself, according to the scientists at that time, even though the breath has stopped or the breath has become extremely subtle. So this is where our Dhamma practice and our Dhamma knowledge, I think, can actually give us fearlessness, because we can know for ourselves, if we're a practitioner of mindfulness of breathing, and we've had the sense as normal of our body disappearing or of the breath becoming very, very little and practically disappearing, that's okay. We know that, and we know how to be relaxed with it, and we even know how being very relaxed with these meditation states, how somehow the body can continue to be functioning well and be oxygenated and even to be healing itself. And then that gives us confidence, it gives us trust, it gives us surety in what we've worked with, that even it comes to the time that maybe we're, as for all of us, it will come to the time with our death that we're not able to breathe anymore. And like the Buddha or the great disciples of the Buddha who then went into these deeper meditation states, then very easy for this. They're already familiar with the breath becoming quiet and the breath becoming less and being relaxed with that. And even going into extremely the most beautiful and blissful states that are possible for a human being with this. So we don't have to have fear about this. Instead, we have knowledge and we have this practice, and we understand that even if we've had just a weekend retreat or 7 days retreat on mindfulness of breathing, probably we've experienced that for ourselves, and we can pick up that practice again now. And even with 5 or 20 minutes a day, then we can get comfortable with this again. And then we don't have to feel that fear about this. And if we have a Dhamma group or Dhamma friends that we're sharing with online, also we can talk to them about this and we can share this. So this can be a spread of knowledge and of ease and of comfort and of practice that can be helpful in case, or for those friends or those loved ones, or even ourselves. Yes?
Yeah. True. I have a question. The first question was for Ajahn Brahmali. It's probably a point of practice question in terms of seeking refuge within, given that the nature of self is anicca, anatta, and dukkha. What are we taking refuge in?
The way to understand that is to see the context. This particular quote comes from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, in the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses. And the context is that, Venerable Ananda is really distressed about the Buddha's passing away. And the Buddha then says to him that, all things that are dear and beloved to you, or everyone that is dear and beloved to you, they must pass away. So you can't take refuge in the world. And then he explains what it means to be Atta-dipa or Dhamma-dipa, taking your self as a refuge or the Dhamma as a refuge. It actually refers to Satipatthana practice. And of course, Satipatthana practice is to go within. Yeah, you don't go without. The world is the outside world of the impressions in the 5 senses, and the world within, through the practice, through finding that peace and that solace and the joy and all the good qualities of meditation practice, of developing your mind. That is where you find the refuge. In particular, you find the refuge in developing those qualities, making them strong, practicing the path. So the refuge actually deepens as your practice deepens, until eventually the entire problem disappears. That's how I understand that part.
There was also a request if you could just to re-explain the illness as natural, as common, as business as usual, rather than, as they say at my work. Just to re-explain that concept around seeing illness as a natural part of the process.
Okay, it's just the idea that, we have a physical body and physical bodies get sick, and we never know when it's going to happen. The cause and conditions that make us sick are so complex and so hard to understand. It can really happen at any time. If it was simple, we would all have known about the coronavirus a long time ago. But the fact that we didn't know about it means that it was unreliable. It comes from very deep and hidden cause and conditions in the world. And this is always true. So it means that illness can arise at any time. Just to give an example, I sometimes, I have two very close family members who died of cancer within the last year or so. And sometimes I think of myself, well, if I have this really bad genetic material, maybe there is a cancer inside of me right now waiting to come out. I don't know, but it's possible. And so you just remind yourself of the cause and conditions and the possibility. And what it does, the beauty of that, it takes away some of the intoxication of life, thinking that, yeah, I'm healthy, I can do whatever I want. Hooray, I can jump around, I can be strong and healthy and fit. And of course, that is really, from a Buddhist point of view, is a deluded state insofar as you forget about the downside of existence. Downside of existence makes your mind more balanced. You don't have the kind of the great excitements in the world, which aren't that great anyway, because often they're combined with craving and restlessness. Nor do you have the big downs in the world, the depressions when you get sick and all those problems. Your mind becomes more even, and you develop a balanced mind with more mindfulness and actually more real and sustainable joy in the mind at the same time. That's really the point of all of this.
And this is a question to all the panel. One of the questions is this pandemic karma? Is it part of the world's karma to actually experience this COVID crisis at the moment?
I'd like to speak briefly to that. And there are different types of teachings on karma, and there's the karma that is volition or intentions, which conditions the way that we experience ourselves and we experience the world. And there's also conditional causation that's just the way that everything is working all the time. And whether it's physical things or whether it's feelings or whether it's mental things. And if we're just talking about physical things in the world, then, just this has arisen out of the conditions that are present in the world. And it's changing according to the things that are happening now, including our volitional actions. And the way that we experience it is also changing according to our motivations and our intentions. So the way that we experience ourselves in this, or the way that we ourselves see and experience this, is conditioned by our intentions and our motivations, our views. As Ajahn Brahmali was pointing out, of course, those motivations are arising out of our views, but our views it's not something that just we were born with. We're just not just born with a particular view or way of seeing something. That's something that's also being conditioned all the time by our actions. So our listening to the Dhamma right now is something that's conditioning our views. For some of us listening, we may have seen our views shift and change even during the time of our listening. So drawing near to wise people and contemplating the Dhamma, looking into the Dhamma, practicing mindfulness and insight is ever so important then for the conditioning then of our views, the changing of our views, and with that then the change of our motivations, which is the primary element that is shaping how we experience ourselves and the world.
I think as it is explained on all the three talks, illness is not necessarily had to be related to the karma, because illness is just part of this organism. So we don't need the karma to get sick. We get sick anyway. But of course, in the Girimananda Sutta, we find among the 8 causes for illness, karma is also given as one possible causes. So there can be certain diseases that is caused by the karma. But we have to understand karma in the sense of dispositions. Because of our volitional actions, we create certain disposition that will push us to certain habits, certain patterns of living, and that can create illnesses too. So when we think about this particular pandemic, definitely there could be human actions, human behavior can have a role in this whole pandemic. So people sometimes talks about collective karma, but we don't have any reference in the Pali canon to to understand that kind of idea, collective karma. But karma can be individual, but as individuals, we can have there are many individuals, so we can have a kind of collective sense. But I think if we want to see this can be really a result of our carelessness towards the the earth, towards the nature, and our too much of our consumption. So in that sense, it is related to human action, human behavior. So I think we need to understand that illness is simply part of our life, but this particular pandemic can be related to human actions. But we don't have to have a karma to get sick.
If it's true also that, Ajahn, did you want to say something?
No, please go ahead, Ayya, please. Yeah.
Well, I was just considering that if it's true that, let's say, I don't know or not, but I certainly, I have a brother who's in biotech. And I hear things about biotech time by time, and biotech in medicine. Then there's also biotech in warfare, and then there's biotech in lots of different various categories. And then there are the motivations behind our human engagement in biotech. And sometimes those motivations are for helping humanity. I feel for my brother, there's a strong motivation to help. And then also there are other people in the biotech business in various fields, for example, in biotech in warfare. Then the causes, the emotional underlying causes for warfare, what kinds of motivations are there? Are there motivations for greed, or are there aversions, hatreds, lust for power? These kinds of things may be there, or there may be just the wish to, in that power, to try and protect, as Giles, our moderator, was saying earlier, like the wish for our own safety and others' safety. And yet with warfare, how much does it really accomplish that? And with other applications of our human endeavors, these wishes may be there for our welfare, our well-being, our safety, our gain, our happiness. And yet how much is it really, are those efforts really accomplishing that? So I'm not sure exactly about the causes of this particular pandemic, but some kind of underlying motivations, motivational karma at the human level among particular people might be there. And then at the level that Bhante Pemaratna was talking about, like hoarding toilet paper. This is also coming from some kind of motivation, and we think it's going to do good for us, but is it then harmful for others? And so to look wisely at these things, that would be a kind of a karma also, yes, that it's like trying to ascertain one's own well-being and welfare at the expense or to the harm of others. So we have to look very carefully at the karma of these things.
Ajahn Brahmali, did you have anything you would like to add to that?
I think that's good, actually. I'm quite happy with that, so that's good.
While you're there, this is a question, it's a term I'm not familiar with. The question was, what role does pirith have in this virus? P-I-R-I-T-H. I think that was
Paritha.
Blessing chanting.
Parita.
Right. Would you like to say something about that, Ajahn Brahmali?
The role of Parita in this?
Yeah.
Parita chanting, you mean? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I think Parita can be useful in many different ways, and it is useful often just on a personal level. You chant Parita, you may have been used to. It might be better for Dr. Venerable Pemaratna to reply to, because it's probably more used to these kind of questions. But if you are used to chanting Parita, maybe you heard Paritas as a child, especially if you've grown up in a Buddhist country. You may have heard these things and may have a certain association with them. You may even understand some of the wording in these things. And if you do, it can be very soothing. It can be very, very useful just on that very personal level in a sense. But I suppose the broader question is whether Parita also can have a more broad effect on society at large, and maybe even an effect on coronavirus. And at our monastery, we often, when we do chanting once a week as a group. And when we do that, we always do it to people who are ill or who have passed away and these kind of things. And the idea, of course, is that to send out some good feelings, some good mental qualities, if you like, towards these people. Can they actually experience it? I think from a Buddhist point of view, it is at least plausible that they can. And one way of ensuring that they will get some benefit, of course, is to tell them that you're doing this. Then you get the placebo effect at the very least. Is there anything beyond the placebo effect? I think there may very well be, because the world is far more mental than normally how we understand the world. And because the world is mental, there is that possibility of transferring things directly from mind to mind from a Buddhist point of view. So although it is very hard to be sure about these things, I would say there's a very good chance that chanting Parita in large groups may actually have a beneficial effect on the entire world, basically, and may actually move us at least a little bit in the right direction.
I have a question for the Ayya and Venerable. What if you're a person who is currently suffering, and perhaps the physical illness has got there, so your existence is difficult? Would there be a chant that you might recommend to soothe the mind in those more difficult experiences?
We've been chanting the Ratana Sutta here every day, especially because of this being the time of coronavirus, and because according to the ancient texts, then this was something that the Buddha asked the Venerable Ananda to do at the time that the city of Vaishali or Vesali was afflicted. And that was beneficial. And so we've been chanting together and thinking about generating beautiful and wholesome states in our own minds, contemplating these beautiful teachings of the Buddhas, and then spreading those. The texts talk about spreading or a radiance of these beautiful qualities. I'd just like to say that I know several people who are ill and who are hospitalized, also in recovery, and a couple who've died. And I'd like to talk about those who are hospitalized, in recovery, or who have recovered. And I've seen that the practice of metta bhavana, or the 4 brahmaviharas, the 4 immeasurable qualities, the divine abidings of loving kindness, compassion, appreciative joy, and upekkha, equipoise of mind, looking on everything with these beautiful qualities, together with mindfulness of the body, and practicing even body sweeping, body scanning, relaxing the entire body with mindfulness of the body, together with knowing that people are sending their prayers, sending their blessings, sending their loving kindness to them. In some cases, we've seen that there's been like an increase in their oxygen levels in ICU, even very quickly, with learning these practices. with metta and with mindfulness of the body. And I was just consulting with another Buddhist nun who, using mindfulness of breathing and mindfulness of the body, was able to wean herself off of the ventilator. And so that was quite a proposition that she'd be able to do that. But she had the idea about how to do it with her Buddhist training and practice. And she was able to see directly as she practiced on the hospital devices. She was able to see immediately, like the effect on her oxygen levels and all of these kinds of things. So biofeedback was there. And then she used that biofeedback then to develop those practices and to get herself off the ventilator. So I'm finding this very interesting, how useful, how helpful, how applicable these practices are. And of course, for the chanting, this is not only for others, but we can also chant for ourselves, for our well-being, and practice loving kindness, compassion, appreciation, and that quality of equanimity that can hold and can pass through absolutely everything with ourselves, our own bodies, our own feelings, our own hearts and minds. We can do that for both ourselves and for others. So this is part of the easing and part of the moving into fearlessness when we know about these things and we know how good and helpful and beneficial they are for ourselves. We know how helpful they can be for others. Not everyone will have the same experience, but these practices can be so helpful for others as well.
Thank you. And Venerable.
Bhante Pemaratna.
Yes.
Yes, Venerable.
So what we can do, I mean, can you ask the question again?
So for those who may be experiencing the illness or any illness, and so, you know, that physical, the intrusion of the physical pain, you know, obviously makes it a little bit more difficult. Is there a chant or chanting that you would recommend to help calm the mind when the body's in that sort and mind's in distress?
Yeah, I know. So definitely, you know, reflecting on the teachings of the Buddha, you know, can really generate kind of calmness, but it depends on the person, right? If the person doesn't have any prior training, it will be difficult for us to, like, you know, really, you know, help the person to like contemplate on the teachings of the Buddha. You know, so we know, you know, in the Buddhist history, when the senior disciples of the Buddha got sick, you know, Buddha helped them to reflect the 8 factors of enlightenment, you know, by simply reflecting those factors that is within themselves, you know, they were able to kind of overcome that physical ailments, at least kind of, you know, release from that ailments. You know, the one enlightenment factor, what we call passaddhi, is actually, you know, more for relaxation of the body. So, but, you know, it depends on the person. If the person has not a great training prior to that, definitely, you know, our compassion is going to really help the person. And so one way we can express our compassion is through chanting. It's like being with, for that person, and then even, you know, giving, dedicating our body, mind, and speech, you know, like dedicating our whole attention for a chant. So then that our expression of the chanting, our chanting will be our expression of compassion. At the same time, the very chanting also create a rhythm that can somehow, you know, calm the person's mind, and then help that person to experience a deeper peace that can go beyond the bodily experiences. So, so if you're asking about a specific chant, I would say, you know, Bojjhanga Sutras, you know, Bojjhanga Sutras will be, you know, one possible chant we can do for such an incident.
One of the questions, Sister, did you have something you wanted to add?
I don't know if Ajahn Brahmali may have been thinking about mentioning it, but a couple of years ago, I broke my ribs. Then it was terribly painful to breathe. Lying down was extremely painful, and then how to sleep when any position lying down was so painful. And someone tried to cheer me up and I started to laugh, and then laughing was so painful, and even breathing was so painful with ribs like that. And then Ajahn Brahm had been here teaching not so long before, and then he had coined a new kind of catchword, combining loving kindness meditation and mindfulness meditation, and he was talking about kindfulness. And so there I was then for the first night then with broken ribs, then lying down trying to get some rest. And then I happened to remember Ajahn Brahm mentioning kindfulness. And then I just started to think about kindfulness. And then thinking about kindfulness, then I was like putting my thinking like a poultice or a bandage or a healing hand to the place where I felt the pain, just where it may be not even exactly where the rib was broken, but just the place where the painful sensation was. So just my mind was wanting to go to that place of painful sensation anyway, because painful sensations draw your mind to them. And so then with the mind being drawn to that place of the painful sensation, just thinking about the kindfulness, the combination of loving kindness and mindfulness together, and then just letting the mind that was going to those places of pain be the mind that's thinking about or with kindfulness in it. And I found that so useful over time. Even also when I hear about someone else being in pain, then it's good to develop this as a habit. So rather than feeling tense and worried about them or suffering with them in compassion, the Buddha's teaching karuna means the wish to end the pain and suffering. And so then with that wish to end the pain and suffering, that kind of compassion, then just letting the kindfulness go to whatever perception there is of them and that pain, and whether they're nearby or whether they're far away, and just letting that rather than it being filled with worry and fear and doubt and all these other kinds of painful qualities, just letting it be full of that contact, be full of kindfulness.
Yeah, thank you, Ayya. One of the other questions, and again, even though I'm directed to ask each one individually, it's open. The question pertains to how to, I guess, be a good practitioner, be a good Buddhist when you're observing people you care about who are losing their jobs or getting sick and may not be Buddhists. What would be the best way to interact and, I guess, support others that may be suffering more than you at this time? I'll start with Ajahn Brahmali. I put you on the spot.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think it very often it comes down to the same kind of ideas, and you just have to kind of expand them out, include everybody in these kind of things. And of course, if someone who is not a Buddhist, first of all, compassion is always the right attitude in these kind of circumstances. And whether people get sick or they lose their job or they are going through emotional problems or psychological problems or whatever it is as a consequence of these things, in all cases, compassion is a very, very reasonable and very relatively easy emotion to give a rise to, because you see that people are kind of walking into this blindsided, not really understanding that these things are around the corner, they can happen at any time, and they suffer terribly. And of course, down the track, once the coronavirus is over, what happens is that then they forget about the coronavirus, they go back into their old habits, and they get intoxicated by the pleasures of the world, and then they kind of start doing the same thing. And then when the next coronavirus comes around, whatever that is, the next problem in life, whatever it is, then they're equally surprised as they were when the coronavirus comes. So there's a big opportunity there for compassion, understanding this terrible combination of delusion and dukkha and suffering in the world. This is really why it is so painful, because the delusion means we will carry on with the suffering also in the future. So having compassion for people actually makes you also more able to be kind to them, because when you understand their suffering, you become more kind, and you don't become kind by proselytizing or trying to convert them to Buddhism. You become kind just by acting with kindness towards them, by speaking kind words, by giving them some little advice on how to live their life. And just that kindness actually opens up people's hearts in a very powerful way. If you want to convert anyone, if you want to help anyone to kind of move towards Buddhist ideas, the most powerful way, in my experience, is to actually be kind to people. That really opens them up. And then they might open up to Buddhist ideas. And then you can tell them about, why are we, this is just the reality of things, maybe we shouldn't be so. And once people get into this idea that illness is the reality of life, then the emotional response starts to change. It doesn't upset you quite as much anymore. You calm down a bit more. You go with the flow. You have mindfulness even in the face of very difficult situations. And that is really where we, would like people ideally to go, because then their life have quality. They can have a very high quality life despite all of these problems going around them.
Thank you, Ajahn. Venerable, would you like to add to that?
I think if during this time we may not be able to offer a big help to our friends, because everybody is facing similar situations. But I think, as all other venerables mentioned, what we can do is like our compassionate heart, the empathizing with their suffering, because sometimes it's so helpful that somebody else understands, how much suffering that person is going through. So giving that empathy, like really listening, and then try to fully, understand, what conditions that person is in. So that kind of empathy can help anyone. So whenever we get an opportunity to give some suggestions, we can do that, as Ajahn Brahmali mentioned. But I think right now, if our friends are losing jobs or whatever, we can listen to them and really empathize with them, and maybe we can gently remind them that this thing is not going to stay forever. Right now it can be really very prominent. It's like the only thing in the life, but this reality will not stay long. Just like anything else, this is going to change too. We just have to have patience until this situation is past.
And Ayya, if you could add as well.
Well, I feel like when I was very new to Buddhism, that there were a lot of things that seemed quite special and unique, and then there's a lot of different terminology and various lists and things like this. And now, having been involved for several decades, then it seems to me more and more like so much of what the Buddha was teaching is just like good human Dhamma. Like really just how to understand what this body and mind is that we've got going on, the body, feelings, and mind, the main basis of our experience, and just how to see the things internally and externally much more clearly and truly as they actually are, and then just good human dhammas, like healthiness of our hearts in our own regard towards our own feelings and minds and bodies, and then also towards others, just like good healthy hearted natural human behaviors towards one another. And when we start to experience the beauty of the human mind and heart through these practices, then we can start to actually trust in the mind and heart much more. We're able to distinguish between what is the kilesa or afflictive aspect, as you were talking about, Giles, and what is the part that's just like normal and natural for the human heart, and very much in line with Dhamma, and that how to let that heart emerge then and to act on it wisely, both towards ourselves and each other. And as we learn this, as we become fluent in this more and more, then more and more it just seems natural. It's just what's healthy and beautiful and natural and true, without all the distortions. Yeah, so the misunderstandings cause distortions, and then the things get all distorted and they get warped and we get confused, and then so much is painful and like that. But when we start to just trust in the true and beautiful and healthy qualities of the heart more and apply them more freely to ourselves and to one another, then it's just good human Dhamma. It's not something specially Buddhist. This is my own opinion. This is my own perspective from this period of time. It seems like this more and more to me, and I feel we can trust this and have confidence in it. But we need to practice the discerning process to see, this is arising naturally, but which part is the kilesas and which part is like in line with what is healthy and beautiful and excellent and good Dhamma.
Thank you. Just to refer back.
And then the sky's the limit. Then the sky's the limit.
Yes.
The sky, it's an expression. Even the sky is not the limit.
Going back to this subject of fear, because in one way, following on from what Ajahn Brahmali was saying in regards to, illness is always there, it's natural. And clearly fear is always there. And in a sense, this pandemic at the moment has risen our awareness of the fear that's always present. One of the questions that was coming forward was that, perhaps fear isn't a poison because it's, it's built into our biology of fight and flight. It's there to help us survive, and a healthy amount of fear can help protect us against things that might be harmful towards us as well. Is there any way of perhaps working with fear at this time in order that it's more wholesome rather than perhaps unwholesome? So I'll let Venerable Pemaratna answer first.
So how we can deal with the fear that is coming up these days, right? Yeah. I think just like with any other negative emotions, whenever we experience fear, it is a difficult emotion. It's not something that we enjoy having. And so many people try to do is that they either try to react out of that or try to hide it, and so we have difficulty of, keeping it, so one thing we can do, is like, really use, like, closely be with that fear, and then and closely watch, exactly what are these sensations arising related, what is this mental state, what are the related physical sensations. So using that fear, not to like hide it, not to like run away from it, not to like quickly push it away, maybe like exploring it and deeply understanding that very mental state. And then hopefully first we can accept it and acknowledge it and try to fully explore get the full gravity of this whole experience in the body and mind, because fear can be a bodily experience too. So closely observe that and then deeply understand, and we can be thankful, because that is an emotion that is giving us a signal that we should do something. So we can be thankful, for that signaling, for that, waking us up. And then fear can also motivate us to do things. But we can be motivated to do unskillful things. We can be motivated to do skillful things. And in fact, the fear of samsara can be a good motivation, right? So we can explore this fear, and then accept it and fully understand that whole phenomenon, and then maybe we should like turn that fear as a motivation. If this is the case, if this is the life, if this is the situation in life, what should I do? So maybe we can use a fear as a motivation to move to the Dhamma, keep our practice more.
And Ajahn Brahmali?
Okay. Yes. Well, first I would like to just to maybe make the point that I don't think fear is not entirely hardwired into us. It may have arisen through evolution, that is true, but certainly it can be, at least it can be reduced. And of course, according to Buddhist ideas, it can also be eliminated entirely. So whether it has arisen through evolution or not, that's kind of, from a Buddhist point of view, it's a bit of a side issue, because regardless, it can be eliminated. But you are right, though. I saw the question there. It is true that what we need to focus on is practical ways of dealing with the fear. And it's not really very skillful to say you shouldn't be fearful. It doesn't really help anyone. So I absolutely agree with that. It's a very good point. And I think one of the things you notice in the world is how much kindness comes out of people in these kinds of situations. Just being a Buddhist monk and seeing all the people who come to the monastery every day, large number of people come to the monastery, and there's no interaction now. They don't get a chance to speak to the monks. They drive all the way from Perth, which is often over an hour away, a car full of food for the monks. They just deliver it on the doorstep and they go back to Perth again. And we get more food now than we normally get. We get more donations now than we normally get. Isn't that astonishing? And this obviously has to do with people's worry that the monastics should be looked after, and they should, something very beautiful is coming out of this, something very positive. And of course, from a Buddhist point of view, coronavirus or not, that is not what determines your long-term future in terms of happiness and suffering. What determines your long-term future in terms of happiness or suffering is your action. So if you see more kindness happening in the world, actually it is a very, very positive outcome. And in the long run, we're going to be far more, the outcome is going to be far better as a consequence of this if we keep on practicing in the right way. So I must admit, when I look at the world and I see all the happiness and all the positive things coming out of it, I actually feel very hopeful. I feel the world is, at least for those who carry this on into the future, it's a very positive thing. And all we need to do is just to remind ourselves it doesn't stop when coronavirus comes to an end.
And Ayya, you get to have the final word.
Well, I was seeing that we're near the end of our time, and you had brought up Pirit or Parita chanting, blessing chanting, and I was wondering if it would be nice for us to close with a little bit of blessing chanting.
Sadhu, sadhu.
What do you think?
I'm happy to do that.
I don't know, with us all being in different places, whether we would be able to or not.
I might not have a chant. I'll leave it to the Sangha.
Yeah.
The sound can only come from one person, right? So maybe Ayya would like to do it.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Ayya, you have the responsibility because of the way it all works. So please proceed.
Okay. Aham Sukita Homi Niduka Homi Awara Homi Apaya Paja Homi Anika Homi Sukhi Atanang Pariharami. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. Sabbe Sata Sukita Hontu Awera Hontu Apaya Paja Hontu Anika Hontu Sukhi Atanang Pariharantu. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. Sabbe sata sabhat dukkha pamochantu. May all beings be released from all suffering. And may we release all the causes of suffering in our own bodies, feelings, and minds.